Yes, sir.
Vladimir Putin today
Oh, I
his
thought you
own-
were introducing yourself. No. I'm Vladimir
Definitely not. Definitely not. Vladimir
What
Putin.
are you doing here? Yeah. Go ahead,
Nick
I'm
Schiffer
sorry.
in PBS NewsHour. Vladimir Putin had his own end-of-year press
Today?
conference today.
Oh, he's trying to step on my message.
Yeah, yeah. His went, I think, 4 hours, so we got,
well,
we
don't
got at
worry
least
about
3
that.
hours. And he said he was willing to end the war in
I
Ukraine.
bet you didn't do it in Spanish.
He did not.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. He said he was willing to end the war in Ukraine based on principles he had outlined last summer, and that included a complete Ukrainian withdrawal from 4 regions, most of which are not occupied by Russia, recognition of occupied Russian territory in Ukraine, and the complete lifting of sanctions. That goes beyond some of the recent conversations you've been having. So do you think Putin is serious about peace, and is the U.S. willing to recognize occupied Russian territory in Ukraine?
Look, I think ultimately there is what people say, and I'm not claiming that that's not his position. I'm just saying there's what people say and then what people do. In the end, we're not going to base our approach to finding peace here on the basis simply of what people are saying. We're going to base it on what people are willing to agree to, what countries are willing to agree to. Our role is very simple. We try to understand what the Russian position, how much can they give and what do they have to have. We understand the Ukrainian position, and we try to find whether those two things can overlap. Maybe that happens this week. Maybe that happens next month. Maybe that's not ready for a few months. That's not up to us. That's up to the two sides. In the end, it's up to them to make a deal. We can't force Ukraine to make a deal. We can't force Russia to make a deal. They have to want to make a deal. The role we're trying to play is a role of figuring out whether there's any overlap here that they can agree to. And that's what we've invested a lot of time and energy and continue to do so. That may not be possible. I hope it is. I hope it can get done this month before the end of the year. I want it to end as soon as possible. I know the president is deeply committed to helping it end. I know this, though. We're the only ones that can do it. If we were not involved, no one would be talking to both sides. The UN can't do it. But who else is going to do it? Nobody in Europe can do it. So I think I think the one thing people should have is an expression of gratitude that President Trump is willing to continue to engage in this despite the fact that we haven't yet gotten the outcome that he hopes to have, because no one else could do it. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So this whole narrative that we're trying to force something on Ukraine is silly. We can't there's no peace deal that Ukraine, there is no peace deal unless Ukraine agrees to it. But there's also no peace deal unless Russia agrees to it. We are just trying to find whether there's common ground that we can make happen. And maybe that's not possible. Maybe it is. Maybe that's not possible right now. But we don't think our work could potentially serve as a baseline for that in the future. Maybe it is possible now. We're going to continue to test it and see where we can get to.
Is the U.S. willing to recognize occupied territory?
I'm not going to speak on any specifics of any deal because we're not going to be able to negotiate a peace deal, especially one like this, in the media. Suffice it to say, let me just put it to you this way. There can't be a peace deal unless Ukraine agrees to it. And there can't be a peace deal, of course, unless Russia agrees to it. But remember that. Any peace deal is one that Ukraine has to agree to because they're a combatant. If Ukraine says we don't agree to it, there won't be peace. So our job is not to force anything on anyone. It is to try to figure out if we can nudge both sides to a common place. And guys, in a conflict like this, in a war like this, that's not easy. It takes a lot of time. We're going to have some patience with it, unfortunately. It's already gone longer. But understand why the president cares about this, okay? Because let's be honest here, and I'm not trying to diminish this, okay? Because it's an interesting position to be in. The United States only we don't provide weapons to Russia. We only provide weapons to Ukraine. The United States doesn't sanction Ukraine. It's only sanctioned Russia. And yet we are still the only country in the world that can talk to both sides. So let's be clear about the role we've played in this so far. I mean, we're the only ones that can. So I don't mean to be dismissive of why this matters or it's important, because this is going on in another continent. We've got issues in our own hemisphere we need to be dealing with. That if you were to ask prioritization, I would argue that something in our hemisphere from our national interest is more important than something in another continent. But it doesn't make Ukraine and Russia unimportant. We care about it. That's why we're involved in it. But by the same token, why does the president care? I'll tell you why. This week, 9,000 people will die, including like 5,000 or 6,000 weekly Russian casualties, okay, in a war. This is a bloody, nasty conflict. In the same time, the entire electric grid, the entire infrastructure of Ukraine is being destroyed almost as fast as it's being rebuilt. Every week that goes by, the cost of rebuilding that country gets exponentially higher. It is now becoming generational reconstruction. This is a very damaging war that's going to have incredible implications. There are now hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, probably maybe in millions, who have not lived in Ukraine in years. They've been displaced to other countries. The implications of this long-term for Ukraine are dramatic, and for Russia too, but for Ukraine, and we're focused on them. This is why the president wants to end it. He thinks it's a bloody, nasty, horrifying war, and he doesn't like wars. He really doesn't like wars. He thinks they're a waste of money, time, and talent. And he wants this one to end. And we're doing everything we can to end it. And it may or may not be possible, but we're certainly going to keep trying.